Hi friends, Ashley from Wildwoods&Homestead. I put together another video of some recent things that we have going on around our homestead. And actually in this video, I ended up bringing you guys along on a trip to the river for our son's 10th birthday. We just did some bushcrafty stuff and made some hot chocolate, which I share that recipe along with a few others, as well as how we pack and prepare for a hiking trip as a family of 10. It was really just the first time that we had taken a break this summer. It seems as though the summer has been really long, but at the same time quite short. The leaves have been changing so quickly, and there is definitely a cold chill to the wind, and the leaves are just falling way too fast, in my opinion. We have beautiful winters, but it can be a little difficult getting through those winters. They are a welcome rest from the very physical hard work we face during the warmer months. However, as winter wears on, we get tired in a different way and definitely long for longer days and warmer weather. I do feel very fortunate that we live and work in nature. However, we are often so busy providing for ourselves that we miss out on enjoying that nature around us. So hiking up to a quiet spot along the river was a much needed rest to simply pay attention to the water and the changing leaves, the scenery, and our children playing in it. So I hope you'll join us for this video and maybe find something useful and perhaps even encouraging. I had many great plans for preserving the garden this year. However, my baby has had other plans. I have had to let many things go this year, and some of the preservation of the garden has to go too. We have simply been harvesting from the garden and using the harvest as we need it. We actually just recently harvested our squash and potatoes, and I did film that, and I am working on a video. I still have our carrots and beets in the ground, but because they are cold weather crops, I am okay to let them sit for another couple of weeks. On this day, we were just harvesting enough carrots for lunch that day. Also, I wanted some carrots to add to a coleslaw, and then I was also packing some to take with us on our hike. I wanted to mention too, this year I tried rainbow carrots, and they are so neat. There's a lot of purple carrots and orange, but some of them are even kind of a little bit of a pink color, and that is so cool. So I am definitely going to grow those again next year. They also seem to have slightly different flavors. I am in a really neat season of life right now. I have 4 older children ranging from 10 to 16, and I have 4 younger children ranging from newborn to 6 years old. When I was a new mother, I tried all of the books on creating schedules around breastfeeding and sleep. But by the time I had my 4th baby, I just decided to stop trying to force my baby onto other people's schedules and go around my baby's schedule. And that first year is hard. My babies pretty much need me 24/7, and it is extremely difficult for me to get anything done. But because we want a big family, it is becoming a worthwhile endeavor for me to learn how to slow down and make peace with that which I cannot always accomplish. Readjusting my expectations and providing for my family within those parameters. There was a time I would have disagreed with myself today for saying that, but having older children who are quickly becoming very independent and confident when they too were once very clingy babies has taught me that I should not stress, and it's okay to cater to a clingy baby, being their provider, meeting all of their emotional, mental, and physical needs. They will be okay, and I am investing in a human being who will benefit greatly as an adult, blessing those around them because they were well loved and cared for. I have shared this coleslaw recipe before, and I will try to remember to write the ingredients out in the description box, but in case I don't, I used 16 cups of some chopped cabbage, and then some of those rainbow carrots from our garden, and then about half of an onion. I just mix all of that up in a big bowl. I like to use red cabbage and green cabbage. And then I make a dressing with about 4 cups of mayo, and I use Chosen Foods mayo because I don't like the ingredients of the other mayo. And sometimes I'm just not able to make my own mayo. Although I think making your own mayo is a very worthwhile task, and maybe there will be times that I do make my own mayo. But for this one, I just used Chosen Foods mayo. I also did a 1/4 cup of sugar and a 1/4 cup of apple cider vinegar, and then thinned it with a little bit of olive oil. When I'm making that coleslaw, I make it the day before. I find that it tastes better the longer that it sits in the fridge. And then my son wanted to make some hot chocolate so that we could make it along the river. And I do not remember the measurements to this recipe. It is not my recipe. It's a recipe that I found online. So I will write the recipe out in the description box. The only thing I changed in this recipe is that instead of using cornstarch to thicken it, I used tapioca starch. I think arrowroot powder would work really well too, but it's a really simple recipe. It's just powdered milk, cocoa powder, powdered sugar, and I just powdered organic cane sugar in my blender and used that. A little bit of sea salt, and then of course the cornstarch or tapioca starch or arrowroot, whichever you prefer. And normally I would pour this into a jar and put it on my counter because I think that would look really pretty. But because we were going to hike up the river, we just put it into a plastic bag so that it would fit into one of our backpacks. And then for my son's birthday, he wanted to make whoopie pies. This is a recipe that I have taught my oldest daughter to make. So I asked her if she would teach her younger brother how to make it, but I just wanted to kind of step in and work it over with them before I got them started on that. And they just took off with it because, again, as I was talking about earlier, those clingy babies have grown up and they are so confident and still humble enough to be taught, and they did a fantastic job putting together those whoopie pies so that I could continue getting some things ready for the following day. And taking even just a day trip takes quite a bit of planning with 10 people, so it was all hands on deck, as I often say to my children when we're needing to get things done quickly. I am just putting in a roast here, and I had a little jar there that is spruce tip vinegar, and that's a vinegar that I make with raw honey, black peppercorn, and our spruce tips that we harvest. It's really delicious, and I can put the recipe to that in the description box as well. It makes a great marinade for meat. So on that roast beef, I was just putting some of that spruce tip vinegar, a little bit of raw honey, and some olive oil and salt and pepper. And then earlier that day, we had also harvested some green beans from the greenhouse, and my daughter is making French cut style green beans with this little cutter that I was just showing there. And then she has a recipe for garlic green beans, and I will share that in the description box too. I just share a little bit of how that turned out a little bit later in this video as well. This year I have a kindergartner and a first grader, and I always enjoy reading the Little House on the Prairie series with my young children who are beginning school. We have lately been reading Farmer Boy, and even though I've read it many times since I was a child and into adulthood, I always find something new in it. And this time around, I'm really impressed by the foods that Almanzo's mother puts on the table. I also love the descriptions in the book pertaining to how the family produces the food. Everyone has a part in it. So this next recipe is inspired by Farmer Boy. In the book, I love how Laura Ingalls describes the delicious foods that Almanzo's mother makes. And the book mentions blueberry pudding. I wasn't sure what that was because when I think of pudding, I think of something milk-based and creamy, not really fruity. So I looked up blueberry pudding and found blueberry cake. I don't know if this is what Almanzo's mother was making, but I decided to try it anyway because it sounded really good. This is a vintage recipe, and I only changed 2 things in it. I changed the flour to a gluten-free flour blend that we make, and instead of using blueberries, I used Saskatoon berries that we harvested from our acreage this year. The cake turned out somewhat dry. I think that is probably due to the fact that I used gluten-free flours. Gluten-free baking does tend to be more dry than regular baked goods. And then Saskatoon berries are not as juicy as blueberries. They tend to hold their shape really well when you bake with them. I think blueberries would have been really good in this because they have so much more juice in them, and I think that that would have added a lot of moisture to the cake. The batter also started to set up quickly and become a little bit less pourable, so that I had to kind of push it down into my pan. But again, I think that is because of the flour that I was using. As well, my Saskatoon berries were frozen when I did this. I think next time I do this, I'm probably going to try blueberries because I'm just curious what that would taste like. But despite those changes to the cake, it turned out delicious, and I can put the recipe to this in the description box. I just show in a little bit how the cake turned out, and I think it would have been really delicious with cream or maybe ice cream. I'm just showing what we had for dinner that night: the roast beef, the squash, and then those are the garlic green beans that my daughter made. And then here is the blueberry pudding cake, and it turned out so great despite being on the slightly drier side. But I definitely think it's going to be a recipe that I add to my rotational desserts. Preparing to go anywhere with 8 kids is quite an event, for me anyway. When my older 4 were much younger, I struggled going many places because I was the one doing all of the packing and preparation. But today things look a lot different. As my kids have grown, they've all taken an interest in the outdoors. Bushcraft, camping, hiking, and more recently, hunting. Each year they ask for items pertaining to these things for Christmas and their birthdays. So they are well set up to pack their own backpacks. They carry their own dishes and utensils, water, compass, knives, fire starters, Geoff has taught them well, and our kids could probably at this stage hike out somewhere and have enough skill to create at least a shelter and heat in a survival situation. They very much enjoy learning about all of that. This year, Geoff is teaching them how to hunt, so we will see how that goes. My young kids have backpacks too, and I just ask everyone to bring their packs to the living room so we can check them over. My older children will bring me my younger children will bring me a backpack with things that they have packed. It's typically a book and rocks and play dinosaurs and things like that. So I tend to have to go through their packs and then sort of repack for them. But I found this trip to be really fun and really easy. Geoff helped out so much, and he had a lot of the cookware. I'm just showing this horse here. We had actually stopped in at the river the week before, and my daughter had drawn that horse, and I thought that it was really neat that nobody had walked on it or touched it, that anybody who had hiked down along the river had just left it. So it was really cool to see that was there. But anyway, yeah, this trip was really great because all of the kids packed their own items and carried them out. It wasn't just Geoff and I trying to haul everybody's stuff. And I think my kids, that has really generated a lot of confidence in them and trusting them to provide for themselves and carry their own items, and then for them to really know themselves and know what it is that they need. Obviously, there are those things that you need in a survival situation, and they are learning about that from Geoff, but they also find what it is that they like to have with them. If there's a certain type of cup that they like to have with them, do they like to take some tea with them? Do they have a certain knife that they prefer? Something like that. And on this trip, actually, I learned something new. I showed just a little bit. Geoff and Gabe were digging in the sand there. They were going to start a fire there, but Geoff found that there were a bunch of rocks in the sand, and the rocks were wet. And apparently, I just learned this, if you try to start a fire with wet rocks underneath or around the fire, maybe to contain the fire, those rocks can actually burst. So we had to find a dry spot to start the fire. And then Geoff was showing Gavin how to use his fire starter. So Geoff showed him how to create a material to basically start his fire with, and then start his own fire. So Gavin had the opportunity to start his own birthday campfire, and that was a lot of fun for him. Here's the hot chocolate that we made. I think the original recipe said to do 2 tablespoons of the hot chocolate mixture per cup of hot water. We ended up thinking that wasn't sweet enough or thick enough. So I don't actually know how many cups of water that pot holds, but we just ended up adding the entire recipe to that. So I don't know, we may have done more like 3 or 4 tablespoons per cup. I think we were just wanting it to be really sweet and really thick and creamy, and it was a treat. It's not something that we would drink on a regular basis, but Geoff and I also added a little bit of instant coffee to it, and the flavors were really nice, and we will definitely do that again. That was really fun. And then I am balancing rocks. This is something that I actually ran across a channel. I think her name is Jonah Jinton, I think, and she lives in Sweden, and she just sort of just shares her life and some of the things that she does. And one of those things is balancing rocks. And I find it to be really, it's kind of like a puzzle, just trying to stack these rocks and figure out, what's going to balance and what's not going to balance. And when I don't have a baby and we've gone down to the river and I don't have my arms full, I have just left stacks of these balanced rocks throughout the riverbed. But on this day, it was a little challenging having Millie on me all day, so I just sat down and had fun balancing just a tower of rocks. And of course my kids like to come over and join me and give me their thoughts on it and advice. Here we are packing up, getting ready to leave and saying goodbye to the river for the year. I don't think we're going to have time to make it back, and that's a little bit sad, but I'm so grateful that we had this time. Another skill that Geoff teaches the kids is to enjoy a place thoroughly and then leave it better than you found it. And our kids did a great job doing that. I was planning to finish the video here, but when we got home, we had whoopie pies to finish, and I am going to share some of that along with a recipe. Okay, I am just going to share the frosting that we used for the middle of our whoopie pies. I did not grow up eating marshmallow fluff. I don't even know if I've ever tasted marshmallow fluff, but Geoff did, and he tells me that this recipe tastes very much like marshmallow fluff. So I am calling this a slightly healthier version of marshmallow fluff, and it is really delicious. I could just sit down and eat spoonful after spoonful of this, and it's really easy to make. It is just 5 egg whites and 1.5 cups of sugar, and you just mix the egg whites and the sugar together in a bowl and then make a double boiler. And you don't have to whisk the entire time that it's on the double boiler, but you can just whisk it occasionally. Bring the egg and sugar temperature to about 165. And then transferred it to our KitchenAid mixer to whip it up. And we just added a little bit of salt and vanilla for flavor until we got it to the consistency that we wanted. And it did hold its shape really well, and it tasted delicious on these whoopie pies. But I think you could use it, if you grew up with marshmallow fluff, you could use it for all of those ways that you would have used marshmallow fluff. Maybe dip apples in it, or I hear it's good on toast, something like that. And I can put the recipe to that in the description box as well. I really appreciate you guys joining us. I appreciate your time. I did not have much in here in regard to the shop and the products that I make and sell, but I will have a link to our shop in the description box in case anybody might be interested in that. For now, I thank you for your time, and I thank you for joining us.
Happy